that moment of truth where I wait for the internet to give us another day, and I have to see it or it's no good. Until I see it, it is not legit. I got to see it. I think it's starting to be seen. It is starting to be seen. It has been seen, and it's looking good. And I think everything should be good in the chat. Let me just go ahead and test it real quick. Let's see here. Hello. All right, it looks like we're good. It looks like we're good. It looks like the chat is back up. Let's see here. Let me just refresh this to make sure we're connected. Sorry, folks. I got to just test everything to make sure because, okay, we are good. Yes, we are good. We are alive. Hello, everybody. All right, cool. Just making sure everything was good there on the tech end. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon to all my East Coasters. Good morning to all my West Coasters. Good evening to any evening time zone folks. And to everyone out in the future, New Zealand, Australia, how's the future? Happy Monday. I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. Quick shout out to the folks that make this show possible. Our friends over at ZT.com, ZHITEA.com, their tea rules, and our friends over at triageoil.com for some topical pain oil that you put on your body. And also our friends over at Indie Left. Indie Left is the only place to find all the articles and videos from your favorite creators. I'm there as well, and they update it twice a day. To learn more and subscribe to all of their podcasts and news information, and also to join their Discord community, you can go to independentleft.media. And also, I did their theme song. Their theme song was done by yours truly. All right, without further ado, I am so excited to talk to my guest today. She is an author. She is an activist. She is the co-founder of Code Pink, and she has just been doing amazing work over the years for the cause of peace in the world. So please welcome to the show, Medea Benjamin. Medea, how are you?
I'm good. Nice to be on with you, Ron.
Good to see you, and thanks so much for doing this. And of course, thanks so much for everything you do. So let's start currently, and then I want to get into some stuff that you actually put out today. But we have a new administration. What are some kind of things we can be going about to try to de-escalate war with the Biden administration, if anything? Like what are some things out there that kind of give you that are actions worth taking and are worthwhile pursuits that are also realistic?
At the top of the list, I'd put stop the U.S. support for Yemen. And this is something that Biden has said that he would do, which is very exciting. This is a war that the U.S. has been in from the time of the Obama administration, supplying the Saudis with all of these bombs that have been destroying civilian infrastructure and killing so many people in Yemen. And now with the pandemic, the last thing that the Trump administration did was to call the Houthis, one of the groups fighting in Yemen, a terrorist organization, which means it's now even hard for humanitarian groups to get aid to the sections controlled by the Houthis. So we have to lift that designation, get that humanitarian aid in, and stop the war. So that's a good place to start.
So let's get into some of the stuff that you've put out today. You published this piece on Common Dreams. You co-authored it with Ariel Gold, Rob Malley for Iran Envoy, a test case for Biden's commitment to diplomacy. So why is Rob Malley your choice here? Kind of sum up what's going on there.
Well, the rumor came out a couple of days ago that Rob Malley was being considered as the U.S. envoy for Iran. And this would be then the person in charge of getting the U.S. back into the Iran nuclear deal. This is something that has been opposed by the Saudis, the Israelis, the war hawks in the U.S. Congress, particularly people like Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, the conservatives in the Iranian American community. And Rob Malley is somebody who would be fantastic for this job because he was the lead White House negotiator when the deal was first signed under Obama in 2015. but he also has a history of being a diplomat, something so lacking in the last administration and frankly in many US administrations. He believes in talking to all sides, in trying to understand from their perspective. And so he would be a fantastic pick. But these groups that I just mentioned have come down hard in the last few days saying, no, 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 you can't have Rob Malley. He's an anti-Semite because he said that the Camp David Accords fell through because of not just the Palestinians, but the fault was also of the Israelis. And that he's talked to Hamas, which is a group that governs in Gaza, but has been designated a terrorist organization. But diplomats speak to all sides, so of course he would speak to Hamas. Others have said he doesn't care about the human rights situation in Iran, which is totally not true. And they've given other kinds of excuses because they don't want to see the U.S. going back into the Iran nuclear deal. They don't want to see an easing of the tensions with Iran. Your listeners and viewers might remember that early last year, the Trump administration almost brought us into a full-out shooting war with Iran in early January when they killed the top general of Iran, Qasem Soleimani. And ever since then, it's been so tense. So it's important that we get an envoy from Iran who really believes in diplomacy, and we get back into that nuclear deal. So we put this out. We also put a petition out because these right-wing groups put out their petition, and we want to make sure that we get more people on our petition. So you can go to the Code Pink website and find that petition and sign on.
You know, Medea, I have to ask, because I couldn't help but hear a couple things. Do you literally live on the line of the peace train? like, is that what I was hearing? Was that what it was?
You heard the train go by. Sorry about the noise, but the train does go by very close to here.
No worries, no worries. I just had to ask. I had to ask. I was like, she might live. I guess the peace train is a real thing, and it stops at Medea's place. I like it.
And we all have to get on board.
I'm ready. You let me know where the stop's at. I'll be there. We'll get on board. I actually wanted to ask you about some about Iran. Do you think that had it not been for the pandemic kind of, being all, being a pandemic, do you think that we would have probably gotten to an all-out war with Iran? Like, do you think that would have been Trump's war had the pandemic not kind of, pushed us away from that?
I thought that we were going to war in January when they killed Soleimani. I thought, how can the Iranians not respond by killing Americans? And it's very amazing that they responded through their Iraqi friends in hitting some U.S. bases, but making sure that they would hit places where nobody would get killed. More recently, the Israelis killed an Iranian nuclear scientist inside Iran. And I thought, once again, the Iranians are going to have to respond by bombing Israel. And then the U.S. would respond by bombing Iran. And there we are. So I have been holding my breath this whole time that Trump has been whipping up the conflict with Iran. And I think you're right. We're not out of the woods yet, though, because there was somebody very close to Bibi Netanyahu who has said that if the U.S. goes back in the Iran nuclear deal, that Israel might have to bomb Iran on its own. So we have to rein in our, quote, friends in the region, the Israelis and the Saudis, and really remake U.S. relationships in the Middle East. It has been so one-sided. Ron, I don't know what you know, if much, about Iranian culture and Iranian people, but they're more naturally U.S. allies than, let's say, the Saudis would be. They love Western culture. They And they have an incredibly long, beautiful culture of poetry, of architecture, of music, of film. If you haven't seen Iranian films, they are fantastic. And it makes a lot more, and they have a more vibrant political system. It's not a dictatorship, an absolute monarchy like the Saudis. There are elections, and elections do matter in Iran. And in fact, the last parliamentary elections mattered a lot because thanks to Trump's hard line with Iran, the hardliners in Iran won the majority of seats, meaning the people who said, why bother even talking to the United States? They're a bunch of liars. They sign an agreement with us and then they pull out. They impose these sanctions that are meant to make our lives miserable, meant to keep us from getting the cancer medicine we need, the relief for COVID that we need. They're the devils. Why talk to them? And then there's elections coming up for president in Iran in June. And it's very likely that a more hardline person will win in that campaign. So what I'm saying is that it makes more sense for the U.S. to have a normal relationship with Iran. I'm not saying cut off ties with the horrific Saudi regime. I'm saying have a more balanced relationship with all of the governments in the Middle East, whether we like them or not.
So let's stay on Iran for a little bit because, I've read your book Inside Iran. It was a while ago when I read it, but I remember, I've since recommended it to other people because you just went throughout history and it was just kind of this crash course. And the theme through every single era was they were doing all these great things and then we showed up and did all kinds of horrible things and then we did it again and again. It was kind of a decade thing for us. We just come back. So
well, wait, decades. And that's important, Ron, to reiterate that the problems with Iran in terms of US relations and in terms of a theocracy that runs Iran today can be traced back to 1953 US CIA overthrowing a democratically elected government of Mossadegh. And then there's, the line through those decades leading up to today with the US screwing over the Iranian people over and over and over again. So it's a terrible example of US imperialism, US hubris, thinking that we can put our guys in leadership like the Shah, who is so repressive, and the people aren't going to rise up against that. And more recently, that we can so squeeze the Iranian economy that even people who hate their own government in Iran, and there are lots of them, are anti-American because they see what the US is doing to them. So yes, we have a history of doing this in many places around the world, but Iran is probably the number one example of how we can screw up a country that wants to be our friend.
How do you, and I'm sure this has just evolved over the years, but how do you, from where you're sitting as a peace activist, how have you battled the, just obvious propaganda in our world of, hey, no, we're the force for good around the world. We're doing good out there. How do you come back to that?
It's tough, Ron, because when you do that, it is taken by some people to mean you don't love your country, you're anti-American. It's tough to tell people that our foreign policy has caused millions of people to die and be displaced and to be maimed, and because we live in, as Gore Vidal said, the United States of amnesia. People either forgot about U.S. history or never learned about it. So it is a tough one, and I think I think one thing is to educate people about it. When I was a young woman, in my late teens, I traveled to Central America, and that's how I learned about what my government had been doing in Central America, overthrowing democratically elected governments, supporting right-wing dictatorships, and later supporting death squads. It took me going outside the US to learn about the effects of our foreign policy. Now we're in COVID time, people can't travel. I used to tell people, get out of the US just to see it from the outside. But it's important to read about US history, to try to look at the world from the point of view of other countries. For example, let's just go back to Iran for a minute. We talked about the US rejoining the Iran nuclear deal. I would think most Americans think Iran bad. They want to get nuclear weapons. We can't let them get them because they're crazy people and they will bomb our friends in Israel. Well, what does it look like from the point of view of Iranians? It looks like here are these imperial Americans who go around the world invading and stealing other countries' resources, and they have thousands of nuclear weapons. And then their friends in Israel who have been oppressing the Muslim population since the beginning of that country, and have been developing their own nuclear weapons, but won't tell the world community how many they have, won't allow any inspectors, won't sign on to any international treaties. And here we are, Iran, and we're supposed to not have a nuclear weapon, and we're supposed to allow the most invasive inspections ever designed as part of this Iran nuclear deal. So the only way the US can get away with pushing Iran like this is because out there is the law of the jungle and might makes right. But, it's at our own peril, because if we want to get out of these wars in the Middle East, if we want the US not to create a new war with a nuclear country like China, we not only have to learn about the effects of our government's policies, but we have to get active. We have to build a stronger anti-war movement. We have to get people to be reaching out to their members of Congress and to this new administration and say, we want a totally different way of being in the world.
So this is kind of a little bit of a lighter one, because in your answer there, you mentioned a lot about the importance of educating oneself on American history and kind of, maybe going beyond the, things you were taught in school in most cases. I saw something on Twitter not too long ago about they were designing this online history class. And just for fun, I retweeted it and said what I would do if I was doing a United States history class. And I basically said, you would read Gun, Germs, and Steel. You would read The People's History of the United States. You would listen to the Dollop podcast, and you would listen to the music of David Rovix. And those were kind of the four things I mentioned as this is what you would do. So I want to turn this over to you. If there was a Medea Benjamin United States history class, what would people be reading, listening to, etc.?
Well, I love the four things you mentioned, so I would certainly do that. I would give people some books like Stephen Kinzer's book about the history of the U.S. in Central America. I would recommend some books on the Middle East that, I'll recommend my own to give people a sense of what the U.S. effects have been in not only Iran, but my book on Saudi Arabia, which I think is really important because the U.S. continues to have this alliance with Saudi Arabia that is now the number one weapons purchaser. So U.S. war economy and so many U.S. jobs are to create the bombs that are then used by the Saudis to kill people in Yemen, for example. I would encourage people to look at some films that give the history of the U.S. There's a fabulous one on Iran that just came out called Coup 53. It might be one of the nominations for documentaries at this year's Academy Award. But it's a fantastic look back at the history of that coup. I would encourage people to read recent things that come out in websites like Common Dreams that I like very much, places like Countercurrents, anti-war, different websites. And of course, I would encourage people to join Code Pink, because we do look at the history and we bring it up to the present and take actions every single week on things that we can do to try to change U.S. foreign policy. And that website is codepink.org.
Yeah, I actually moved to a different neighborhood recently, and there's a pretty big Code Pink presence where I'm at now. So I live in San Pedro.
Ah, wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I hope you don't mind. I was writing stuff down as you were talking, but let's go to the day of action for Yemen then, because this is something that you just tweeted today. Let me go ahead and pull it up for everybody so they can see it. So what's going on here?
Well, this is a group that's at the Saudi embassy in D.C., but there are 300 organizations around the world that signed up to today's Day of Actions. And so people are doing physical rallies in countries around the world, but they're also doing online. In fact, as we're speaking, there is a global online teach-in that's happening that people can go to afterwards on the Code Pink YouTube channel. And it's got people like Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party in the UK. It's got wonderful Yemenis, the actor Danny Glover, the brilliant scholar Cornel West. And it's a great way of gathering across borders to say no to the U.S. continued war on Yemen. And this is our friend in the video you see, Hassan who is from the Friends Committee on National Legislation, a Quaker group, and does terrific lobbying to try to stop U.S. support for the war in Yemen. And I want to say that because of all these wonderful U.S. groups that have worked so hard, we actually got twice bipartisan legislation passed in both the Senate and the House to say stop the U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. Unfortunately, they were vetoed by Donald Trump, but this time around they will not be vetoed. So that's progress.
So does this have anything to do with the legislation that Ro Khanna introduced as well? Is that part of this too?
Yes, and in fact, Ro Khanna is on the global webinar today, and he's been a real champion on this issue, as has Bernie Sanders.
And so to just clarify for everybody watching, Ro Khanna has introduced legislation to it is to stop the sale of weapons in Yemen and stop U.S. intervention in Yemen, or what exactly are the details on that legislation?
Well, it's to stop the U.S. support for the Saudis' war in Yemen. And according to our Constitution, it's the U.S. Congress that has to declare war, not the executive branch. But that's been violated so much. And this U.S. involvement in Yemen is an example of that. So the executive does not have the right to continue supporting this war in Yemen. And we hope that we're going to see a cutoff in U.S. weapon sales and other kinds of support that the U.S. has been giving to the Saudis.
Do you think we should only ever go to war via a people's legislature?
Well, I don't think we should go to war. So.
Well, yeah. No. I know that, but I mean, that was a poorly framed question. But like, do you think do you think the only, like, it should be the people deciding anything like that ever? Like it should just be like, we get to vote. And, my rule of thumb, Medea, is that I am against any war unless I'm willing to go fight in it myself. That's why the only war I've ever been for is the war on drugs. I'm fighting for drugs and we're going to win this thing. Like, I think that we should just, I mean, I'm kind of for just straight up having a people's legislature and getting rid of just the Congress and just getting rid of all of it. And we just vote on any types of policies. Do you think that any type of conflict the U.S. should get into should be voted on by we the people?
No, because I don't think people know enough about these issues, and I think they can be easily manipulated. You take a poll and you phrase it one way. You say, "Do you think we should get involved in overthrowing the government of Iran, that is the world #1 state sponsor of terrorism and hangs gay people and etc." And people say yes. If you say, "Do you think we should go back into a nuclear deal that stops Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and can lead to further talks to end the conflicts in the Middle East?" people will say yes. So I think these are issues that have to be discussed and decided at the level of the United Nations. The U.S. will take unilateral military action. And so that should be left to multilateral organizations where you can hear the different sides and hopefully push for ways of avoiding war.
Right. Yeah, no, I can get on board with that. I guess what I was getting at there is, it's, they make these horrible decisions that brutalize the Middle East, that brutalizes the rest of the world, and screws people over at home. Which I wanted to ask you this. I see the connection between what has happened with this pandemic and our economy of war here in the United States. You see, this pandemic has revealed just how brutal our system is to the people who live here, that they don't really give a hoot about the American people. And part of the reason it is that way, or a big part of the reason it is that way, is because we have an economy of war. And what does an economy of war need? Well, it needs people to go fight these wars. And if you weren't economically crushing people, you wouldn't have people who are, joining the military and going to fight these wars because they feel like they have no other option except to join the army or whatever it may be. Do you agree with that connection? Do you see that connection? And if so, do you think more people are waking up to that because of this pandemic?
Well, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is where I just feel so passionate right now. You're right. The pandemic has opened people's eyes to say, why can't we take care of our own people? Where is our money going? And when you have over 50% of our discretionary funds going to a Pentagon that keeps looking for enemies to fight, then you can't take care of your own people at home. And now we are in a position where we can look and say how the war economy is literally killing us. And I'm excited because there is movement on this issue now. There's a new caucus, actually, that started in Congress called the Defense Spending Reduction Caucus. And we're trying to get as many members of Congress to join that. It's a commitment to calling for a 10% reduction in Pentagon spending. Now, for me, that's not nearly enough. I think we should cut Pentagon spending in half. But in this country, just calling for 10% cut is actually huge. So we want to move in that direction. I'm also really excited because we have made wonderful connections with groups that are fighting poverty in the United States, like the Poor People's Campaign. I don't know how many of your viewers know who Reverend Barber is from the Poor People's Campaign, but he just gave the homily for the inauguration of President Biden. And in his homily, he talked about the war economy. That just blows my mind.
And nobody cut his mic?
Nobody cut his mic. And he makes this one of the pillars of the issues that he talks about, that we've got to stop the war economy and put our resources into what our people need and what our planet needs. And so I think we're in a very good position this year to build up that support and to out the members of Congress who refuse to say, yes, we should cut the Pentagon by 10%, because guess what? When you look at who refuses that and you look at the money they take for their campaigns, there is a direct connection. They tend to be the ones that take more money from these weapons manufacturers, or as the Pope calls them, the merchants of death, like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and Northrop Grumman. And so we also have a campaign to stop members of Congress from taking money from the weapons industries, to divest from the weapons companies. And then we have to make the connection between the environment and war, connection between the guns that flood our communities at home and the weapons we sell abroad, make the connections between the use of military-grade equipment in our communities that have been used so much against people of color, and the connection there between the weapons that we dump all over the world. So there are so many important connections that we are making now. And I know even in Code Pink, we're starting to build a youth community of Code Pink. We're getting more diverse as an organization. And this is so important because the peace movement was big and strong under the Bush eras, when we came out by the hundreds of thousands to say no to the war in Iraq. Obama came in and it fell apart. And now we've got to really rebuild it, and in a different way, so that it is diverse, that it is intergenerational, and it makes all of these different connections that you, Ron, started out by making.
So first of all, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know we just have a few minutes left here, but I did want to spend a little bit of time just kind of talking to you broadly about Code Pink. So first of all, how did it kind of come to formation? What's kind of the story in your words there?
Well, I'll date myself by saying that during the beginning of the Bush years, he had this color-coded system called red, yellow, orange alerts. And it was part of making people feel constantly in a state of fear about being attacked, and justifying the invasion of Afghanistan, justifying the invasion of Iraq, justifying a national security state, the Patriot Act, et cetera, et cetera. And so we formed Code Pink to say, let's go after the individuals who attacked us on 9/11 and not use this as an excuse to invade other countries and deprive us of our rights here at home. So we've been working for the last 20 years. We call ourselves a feminist organization, and we invite men to be part of that. We are a group that is very active. We were one of the few groups that stayed active during the Obama years, calling him out for his policies that kept us in this state of war. And it's funny, Ron, because you mentioned how the people, it's kind of a poverty draft with people who don't have other options going to fight. But we also should say, thanks to Obama, that they really moved the U.S. fighting away from Americans getting killed to only the people we attack getting killed, because of so much of the use of drones and aerial warfare. And that's why I wrote a book called Drone Warfare: Killing by Remote Control, to show that now we don't even have to put our own military at risk. We can just press buttons and kill people thousands of miles away. So Code Pink has been trying to turn the U.S. War machine around slowly by getting us out of the wars we're all still in, stopping new wars, For example, we went with a group called Women Cross the DMZ. That's the, quote, demilitarized zone. It's the most militarized zone in the world between North and South Korea, calling for peace on the Korean Peninsula, and we applauded Trump when he reached out to Kim Jong-un. Unfortunately, he just botched the whole thing. But now we certainly are part of calling for peace in the Korean Peninsula under the Biden administration. We call for U.S. to withdraw the hundreds and hundreds, over 800 military bases that we have spread out all over the world. And we have these bases there. Many of them are relics of a Cold War. And speaking of Cold War, one of our big programs right now is to stop the Cold War, a new Cold War with Russia and China. And we have a campaign called China is Not Our Enemy, where we do some kind of action every single week to try to get more fair coverage about China, to try to promote cooperation with China on things like the pandemic and like the climate. So these are some of the things that we're involved in. And we feel very excited that under this Biden administration, we can really see some changes. We're very happy that he lifted the Muslim ban already. That's very important and affected a lot of our friends in Muslim countries around the world. And we're looking forward, as we talked about here, to re-entering the nuclear deal. But if we want to get out of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, I don't think this Biden administration is about to do that without a lot of pressure from us. So let's say, let's not look back 4 years from now and see that these wars we've been in now for over 20 years. Let's try to make sure that we use this administration and a Democratic Party that has the House and the Senate to say, get us out of these wars.
So you guys, y'all do a lot of direct actions, and y'all do a lot of, I don't know what the right way to put it is. I don't know if I would call it pranks, but like, I guess kind of theatrical, symbolic actions, like having the blood on the hands, yelling war criminal at Donald Rumsfeld, which was one of my personal favorite moments, by the way. But do you have a favorite action that you've done?
Yes, I do. And it was an action when many years ago, the U.S. was threatening a naval blockade on Iran, meaning that Iran could not ship any of its oil. Iran could not get shipments of food and medicines or anything into the country. And there was a Democrat who was a key member of the committee that was contemplating this. And as we were thinking about what can we do to push these people, we found out that he lived on a houseboat in the Potomac, right in Washington, D.C. And we thought, oh my gosh, how wonderful. And we created our own naval blockade. We got canoes and paddle boats and all kinds of crazy little boats together. We made life jackets that had peace signs all over them. We decked ourselves out with all kinds of regalia. And we went and we blockaded his house so that he couldn't get out of the house at 7 a.m. when he was going out to work. It was such a brilliant action. We had Fox News with us there. We had the Washington Post. We had all kinds of media. And the best thing about it is the congressman came out looking out, to try to get out of his boat. And he looked around at all these mostly women clad with boas and pink life vests and everything. And all he could do was start laughing. And it broke the ice. We let him out. And he came over and put his arms around us and said, I've never seen a more clever action in my life. Why don't you come and we'll meet in my office and talk more?
And was that a productive discussion?
It was a wonderful discussion, and we became quite friendly with him. So that was one of my favorite actions because the result was such a good one.
Well, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. And of course, thank you for everything that you do. In closing here, please just direct people anywhere you want to direct them to learn more about you, to learn more about Code Pink, and just anything else you want to mention.
Well, I mentioned that people should sign up for our alerts on the website, which is codepink.org. But we also have something that's even more exciting, which is every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we are doing educational events and action. The action part is really exciting because we learn and then we stop and we say, okay, here's a script. Now let's get on the phones. And together we get on the phones and we start calling Congress people, senators, the White House, leaving messages. So it's really exciting. We get top-notch people. Sometimes they're Congress people, sometimes they're authors, brilliant analysts. We have tomorrow night is the fantastic writer and analyst Trita Parsi on Iran. We invite people to join us. We have actually several hundred people who are joining us every Tuesday night. So you can go to the Code Pink website and find that. It's called Code Pink Congress.
Thank you so much, Medea. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everything that you do. I appreciate you talking to me today.
Great. Thanks for having me on. Have
Cheers.
a great day. Bye.
You too. That's Medea Benjamin, everybody. That was Medea Benjamin. A lot of knowledge there. And I do recommend her book, Inside Iran. I've not read her other books. I have not read her Saudi Arabia book, but I think I should do that. I was writing down when she was describing her history class. I was writing down everything she was saying to the best of my ability. Now I have chicken scratch writing, but she recommends Stephen Kinzer and a book about the history of the U.S. in Central America. Her book on Saudi Arabia, the film Coup 53, and then a couple websites: Common Dreams, Countercurrents, Anti-War. A lot of those websites I've been to before. I'm sure a lot of y'all have as well. But that's yeah. I think what do you guys think? I think I might want to make. Do you guys think I should make that the history class question just a standalone clip on its own? I mean, it kind of goes into other topics we were discussing, but do you think that would make a fun standalone clip by itself? You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm thinking about that. I'll probably talk about it with Joe, my editor, later. Ben, what's up, buddy? Thank you for the super chat contribution. And you say Cedars insulting BJG on his show on Force the Vote. Okay. Look, I like to talk to people about ending the wars and de-escalating the wars. I don't really want to why would you spend time doing that? Like why would you spend time doing that? I mean, I know that there was a debate that they all had, and that was it. But thank you for the super chat contribution. I appreciate the super chat contribution. Yeah, folks, that's the show today. I appreciate everyone being here, and I will see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow's guest is Savage Joy. She's going to be on the show. And what else did I want to say before we dismount today? Patreon.com/Ron Placone. If you want to start the year off right with a theme song, don't you want your own theme song? You can get one. For what? A give what you can level. I only have one tier on my Patreon. It's pay what you can. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. You get a patron stream once a week. You get a patron Zoom show once a week. And you get a theme song if you want it. You have to ask for it. But if you want a theme song, you can get one. So, if you are on stable ground. If you're not on stable ground, don't worry about it. But if you have a little extra to spare each month and want to join my Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Placone, give what you can level. If you're not on stable ground, don't worry about it. I know times are crazy right now. There's all kinds of things you can do to support this show and all the other shows you know and love that do not cost a dime. You can like these videos, share these videos, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and make sure, because they unsubscribe people, so make sure you're subscribed. Do not let them unsubscribe you. That goes a long way. I know you're like, that doesn't, nah, it goes a long way. It really does. All right, folks. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Go to codepink.org, learn more. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Until tomorrow, Lucy says meow. Where is she? Where'd she go? She's usually like right on the chair, just chilling. So I did the point over to her, and she wasn't there. She bounced. She's like, I'm going. I had a power outage earlier today. That's why I was really nervous about checking the. That's why I was checking really neurotically at the beginning of the stream, because I had a power outage today, so my internet was out for a while, and I was actually worried that the show today wasn't going to happen. Fortunately, it did happen. I feel like I was scared to mention it during the beginning because I thought I would jinx myself. Like at the beginning where I was like, let me make sure. And I was really thorough and like making sure things were up and was like nervous they might not be up. That was because I had a power outage most of the morning and was worried this interview wasn't going to happen. And I didn't even want to say something at the beginning of the interview because I would worry. I was worried I would jinx it. Now that the interview's over, I'll say it. Hey, I had a power outage. And it freaked me out. Not freaked me out, but it was. We've been getting high winds in my neighborhood, and it caused my internet to go down last week. Some of you guys probably remember that. I was actually on the Jimmy Dore show when it happened, and yeah. So anyway, fortunately, the power didn't throw everything off, and now I can be like, all right, I got power. That's great. You guys know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.